Hi folks, Ryan Honeyman here from Lift Economy. Many folks have come to us over the last 10 years and asked, how do I get more involved in creating an economy that works for the benefit of all life? They also ask, what skills and experiences do I need to help make this transition? So 3 years ago, we created something called the Next Economy MBA to help address this and similar questions. Lift Economy's Next Economy MBA is an online course that's designed for entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, students, recent graduates, employees, and folks who want to learn more about transformational next economy strategies and businesses. Join the growing alumni network of nearly 250 alumni who've gone through this program and learned essential skills and hopefully built lifelong relationships for catalyzing businesses in the emergent and regenerative economy. So we encourage you to check out our course. You can go to lifteconomy.com/MBA. The next course, Cohort 7, starts on September 21st, 2021. So once again, go to www.lifteconomy.com/MBA. And now, on with the show. Welcome to Next Economy Now. The goal of this podcast series is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, equitable, democratic, racially just, and whole systems approach to creating the new economy.
Doria and Princess, so grateful to have you. Welcome to Next Economy Now.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Doria, can you share with our listeners kind of the inception of Cooperation Richmond and how it got started, how it turned from your work in urban agriculture into this financial cooperative?
Right. So about 7 years ago now, we really got up to a place in Urban Tilth in my home organization where we felt like there was a limit to the amount of leadership development and inspiration that we could give like young people of color who, really needed an opportunity to shine, to like step up and create the circumstances in this community where they could really thrive. But there was like only so much we could do within Urban Tilth. And I started to think about, one, it wasn't good to keep expanding Urban Tilth. Like you'd only go so far. It needs to be what it is, And so I started thinking about what do people really need to take the ideas they have and transform them into self-sustaining enterprises, And I started to look around and kind of get involved in different things and got really interested in cooperatives, thinking about like all the things I hate about the current economic system and how I didn't want to replicate things that, in my opinion, put the people I love in the terrible situations they are in now with like generational poverty and, just constant struggle, constant hustle, constant struggle. So I didn't want to be a part of that. I didn't want to create something new that would make people just winners in the winner take all kind of game, in like the whole capitalist enterprise. But I do value enterprises, like people making things for other people, that people need in order to sustain their lives and sustain their communities, And so cooperatives were just really interesting. And I started to look around at the different cooperatives that were kind of incubators and boot camps that were out there and started to notice that they were primarily white. They were primarily focused around folks who were middle class, upper middle class, had some credit, had things that they could, the wherewithal to actually start businesses. And oftentimes they would have kind of gatekeeping, you would have some kind of an application or whatnot where you would have to get into the program. And, looking at those applications, looking at people's experience trying to get into some of those boot camps and whatever, they actually excluded people who didn't have the best educations or, didn't have a bunch of the pieces in place. And so I started to think about, well, what would a community like Richmond really need to support low income people of color who grew up in the school system that I grew up in here to be successful in developing and launching cooperatives? And so I actually sat down with a woman woman named Fressa from CCCD, which is a cooperative incubator in Davis. And we started to just meet in a cafe and like actually sketch out what was missing. What do we really need? And it's like, we don't really need multiple workshops. What we really need is somebody to walk the path with people, It's like oftentimes people will get really excited about cooperatives. They'll go to a workshop, they'll go to a talk, and then what do you do afterwards, right? Or they go to a boot camp, and then what do you do afterwards? They have all these ideas, but they don't know how to move those ideas forward. So we started to basically create what we felt like were the missing pieces to success. One big missing piece was just that, having somebody to walk with your co-op as you try to navigate all of the different things that you come across, that you confront when you're trying to start a new business, any kind of new business, but even more so when it's a cooperative business, right? So having somebody to walk that path with you, a coach, a mentor, we call them project officers, and then help you like create a plan and stay on that plan and whatnot. And then the other super important thing was capital. Like people in this community just, who the section of people that I was really looking to work with, they just don't have access to capital. They don't have savings. They don't have collateral. They don't have credit, So it doesn't matter how good their idea is or how much they would be willing to work for it. They just will not be given access to the amount of capital they need to sustain that 5-ish years of not making money. In order to, actually launch a successful enterprise. And so along that pathway, we started to pull in other people. And that's when I pulled in my good friend, Gopal Dainuni, and Vivian Hong of Asian Pacific Environmental Network and Movement Generation. And they had actually already been working with the Working World and the Climate Justice Alliance on trying to reimagine how we could kind of move money from the extractive economic system and into economies that are sustaining for communities, that are regenerative. And they had been dreaming up the National Financial Cooperative. That's what it was first called. Now it's known as the Seed Commons, and they're working with the Working World on that. And so when I brought on Gopal and Vivian onto the steering committee, along with Marilyn Langlois, who had been working with our former mayor on a whole cooperative initiative in Richmond, when I brought them all on, everyone had been working on various projects already. Maryland had launched a cooperative loan fund in Richmond, but it didn't have any kind of capacity building support. It was just a money giving thing. And so they didn't have a lot of success with their loans because people needed a little bit more support, not just money. And then Gopal and Vivian had been working with the Working World on this brilliant national financial cooperative. And so, we just kind of merged all the ideas and came up with Cooperation Richmond, which had all of these elements that we felt like were really important to making sure low-income people of color can be successful in launching cooperative businesses, as well as this extremely important national connection through the Seed Commons to capital. And that's kind of where we are today. We're all on the steering committee of Cooperation Richmond. We brought on these amazing project officers. Most of them are local Richmond folks who are kind of learning as they go how to, do these businesses as well. And it's exciting. It's an exciting time.
So that's you, Princess, right? You're the project officer.
Yes, I am.
Wonderful. Yes. Could you share with our listeners kind of like how you came to Cooperation Richmond and kind of what drives you?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Richmond. So, all of the things that Doria was talking about, like our school system and, just the nature of Richmond. It's hard growing up out here. I never knew about resources that were available or resources that aren't available. So I started working with Urban Tilt, which is an organization that we basically grow food and we provide it at low or no cost. So I've been working there for about 5 years. And before that, I really didn't have a real career path on really what I wanted to do. So when I started working with Urban Tilt, it just really brought me closer to just nature, environmental things. But when you think about environmental things, you also have to think about our economy and our society that we live in. It's not just, we're growing food, but then who are the people that need this food and things like that. So I just started broadening my my thinking or my thought process. And I had started telling Doria about my aspirations and about what I really wanted to do. I was like, I really want to own my own business one day and things like that. So I ended up going back to school 2 years ago to just get as much knowledge as I can get on just like how to run a business, how to start a business, and things like that. And so I graduated 2019, and then Cooperation Richmond was launching, and it was just like the perfect thing, for me to be in. And when Doria presented the offer to me, I was just like really excited because, okay, I wanted to own my own business, but now I get to actually open up businesses for my community and things like that. So I was just really excited about it, and I got on board.
Congratulations. That sounds amazing. Could you share some of the stories? Because I think our listeners would love to hear about who are some of these people you work with, who are some of these entrepreneurs, and what's some of the work they're doing?
Yeah, so I'm from the neighborhood that I started working in, which is North Richmond. It's an unincorporated area outside of Richmond, California. And so basically, I know a lot of people out there. Like, I take my son to school. I always see a lot of people just making, ends meet. So I see like a tamale lady in front of my son's elementary schools, and she's out there every morning. She's selling coffee. She's selling tamales. I see young Black men on the corners selling barbecue, chips, and snacks. So like I'm around it, and I see like all the entrepreneurs in my neighborhood all the time. And so when Cooperation Richmond started and launched, we hosted a 6-week workshop to get interest, see if people were interested in even, taking their businesses or taking their ideas to the next level. And so, yeah, a lot of people came through. Right now, we are working really, really closely with about 3 projects right now. And so one of them I started working with is called Starwings. She's a North Richmond resident, grew up in North Richmond. Her whole family is from North Richmond, and she already had a catering business. So she came to the workshop and completed it. And out of that workshop, she developed a cooperative with her family members to launch an online delivery service. And so we've been basically working closely with her. We've been writing loan memos, working really closely with the working world, getting from loan coaches from them, actually walking us step by step through the process of how to like get ready to get a loan. And then what that loan means, like it's a non-extractive loan. So also relating that message to our members of the cooperative that, this loan is for you, and it's for your cooperative, for people like you, so that you won't get stuck in a bind, or if things don't work out, you won't be turned away, or just your assets won't be taken away from you. If you go through a regular bank, you have to put up collateral, you have to have something, And so these loans, making sure that we educate them about these loans. And so these loans work perfectly for the members that we're working with. And so that we're getting them ready to basically get loan ready, get their loan and get prepared and ready to launch their business. So we've been doing business plans, proposals, working on basic pro formas, and just working really closely with them on visualizing their business within the future, visualizing your business 5 years from now. So we've been working really closely with them on that.
Such inspiring work. Thank you so much. I'm realizing our listeners might need a little bit more information about the working world. Would one of you be willing to share sort of how the national works and how it relates to the local Cooperation Richmond?
The Working World is actually an independent nonprofit that had just a few decades of experience actually making loans to cooperatives, both in the United States and internationally in Latin America, kind of being that kind of high touch loan coach, so that it wasn't just that they were making a loan, but they were also, the way that they describe it is, they are successful when the cooperative is successful, That's the only way they're successful. So they're really in it with the cooperative to make sure that anything that they need to help building capacity for, or, kind of reworking parts of their business plan, they'll help them do, so that, in the end, the loans get repaid, and then they're able to make new loans to new folks. That's how success is measured. They were the original kind of anchors for what is now known as the Seed Commons. And the Seed Commons is a national network that is no longer solely under the Working World. It actually is its own entity, but it started with the Working World and it became recently its own entity. And so basically it's a national financial network where funds are pooled nationally, kind of in New York. And there is capital that can come into the Seed Commons, through that national arm, and various types of capital. Some of it is actually investment capital. And it goes into this national fund that then gets drawn down to local loan funds. So Cooperation Richmond is a local loan fund a member of the National Financial Cooperative that is the Seed Commons. And we can, as a member, go to the Seed Commons, to the Sustainability Committee, and request a loan using their national pot of money, which is so much bigger than ours, to support one of our businesses. And again, it's non-extractive. It's very, very, very low interest, basically pays for the overhead of the workings of the Seed Commons. And they're never extractive in terms of no collateral. If the loan tanks, that's a loss and it tanks, but you have a 97% repayment rate in the Seed Commons. So things are going pretty well. And so we can draw down those funds, and there's local control over which projects we bring to that sustainability committee. And so it's Cooperation Richmond that determines that. And, the thought is that every local loan fund knows best what their community needs, right? The kinds of businesses, the types of people that need this kind of support. And so you leave those decisions to be made locally, but draw down from this national pot in order to fund the work. And another kind of awesome thing about the National Financial Cooperative is it is a cooperative. And so as soon as you become a member of the Seed Commons, you actually get a vote on that sustainability committee. So it's not just some random group of people, but it's actually members of each of the loan funds that are making the decisions over whether or not loans will be made, ultimately to the different loan funds that are requesting loans. And so it's a cooperative effort along with the funding, which is also something called the peer network. And it's very behind the scenes. People don't realize how important it is, but it's basically a network of all of the project officers and the loan coaches who are working within the Seed Commons who share information. And so our project officers, Princess and Kingdom and Joanna, can all once a week and through Slack and a couple other ways of communicating, annual trainings and workshops, talk to other project officers who are working with similar types of businesses, similar industries, maybe have a similar issue. They want, feedback on how to do something. You can actually send those questions out to the peer network and get a lot of information back. We share templates on, loan notices. We share templates on how to deal with certain issues. So we don't have to actually remake the wheel in every local loan fund location. We can actually pool knowledge and share knowledge so that the whole network is stronger. Yeah, that's the Seed Commons and the peer network within the Seed Commons.
Beautiful. Our listeners have familiarity with how extractive investing is in our communities traditionally. But just to underscore, there are so many paradigms that y'all are flipping. It's amazing. And to really recognize that Seed Commons has invested $7.8 million through this model and, hopefully continue to grow and grow and grow to really change the nature of extractive capital as it is.
Exactly. And investing that kind of money into communities, neighborhoods, individuals that just would never have a pathway in any other circumstance. Like even the kind of low income loan programs often, especially for the folks that we work with Cooperation Richmond, the bar is too high for actual low income people, to qualify. So it's revolutionary. It really is.
And building on that, across the nation, we're also seeing that not only are these communities ones that might not have access to capital, but they're also communities that have, like you said, the wealth of resilience and knowledge that we all depend on. Our shared future is dependent on that being supported and the success of that. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I think it's important right now, especially with a lot of folks looking at defunding police and just all of the interconnected pieces that people are getting really aware of how these are interconnected.
Right. I think that what we know is that people who are living in the midst of struggle often have pretty good ideas on how they can transform their communities and their lives, but, just don't have the resources to do anything about it. Right. And I think that in these times, we're at a point where we really need to be listening to and following the lead of the people who are on the front lines. Not that folks know every single thing, because we definitely are doing capacity building and, kind of a lot of kind of education, but the basic ideas for the types of and the approach that we need in order to really transform things like generational poverty, that kind of stuff, frontline communities know, because they know that they're worthwhile, they know that they have a fire within them and they can provide for themselves if given the right conditions, and they know that for so long, the conditions have been they've been set up to fail, and I think that we're in this moment where, it's past time for us to move resources back into communities where resources have been extracted systematically, whether the resource be actual capital and houses and whatnot from housing collapses and whatnot, or labor through the way that the capitalist system works and you work your whole life and you're still poor, It's way past time for us to kind of reinvest those resources, repatriate those resources, matriate back into the communities where they came from, the labor that built this country, to put those resources back in the hands of the people who died for them, lived and died for them. So, it's a powerful moment. We've got the structure of the seed commons and the cooperative movement, the way that we're understanding it, in this context, amazing tools that we can use for some serious transformation of our economy, right? Because oftentimes many of the social justice issues that we see, food justice, environmental justice, all these things are based in economics and in economy, right? So if we're not working on transforming the economy and the way that it runs and the principles that it lives by, we're not gonna be ultimately successful on transforming those other things that are connected.
This work alone is just very inspiring to me. I just always loved being in this type of working environment because I actually have a say. Like, mind you, I had no experience, like I didn't have any experience. So, but coming into this work and actually being able to create my working environment and things that, okay, these are things that I need to learn, but things that I already know, And so like being able to just have a say in it is just inspiring to me, period. Like, just period. Cause I've worked plenty of jobs before and I've never ever experienced a job like this that actually made me feel good, with the work that I'm doing. The work alone is inspiring. The project's inspiring. Being able to see an actual successful cooperative in Richmond, which is Rich City Rides right now. It's a bike shop in downtown Richmond, and being able to see how successful they are and knowing the historical context of cooperatives, it's just like, yeah, we need to revisit our history, right? But also, we also need to keep in mind that we're in a new world now. So we have to, the new technology, new thing, we're going to need that, but we also should revisit, our history and how businesses were really developed from our ancestors and how they thrived in those days. And so that's why I feel like it's just inspiring all the way around.
Just to kind of add on to that, if I could, Rich City Rides, I love the story of Rich City Rides. It was our first project. And just to be clear, they had already started a cooperative business without like the kind of legal trappings and whatever. They were, kind of three guys working cooperatively and running this business together, but it was not financially successful. It was not, financially sustainable, which is one of those things where it could be a beautiful thing for a little while and then it would fade away and all the community would go, oh yeah, that's the lesson, like those kinds of things don't work, And so what happened was when Cooperation Richmond came in and took it on as a project, we're like, with support, this is a thing that can work, and they needed capital. They needed, that coaching support to keep moving on along an action plan and whatnot. So we took it from, this labor of love that was started with one of the founding members, retirement package from a previous job of like $2,000, and a lot of community connections, way undercapitalized business. We took it from there to a business that is seeing just record sales, really approaching the honestly profitability measure where they can both pay themselves and take home like a split at the end of the year, where they have a line of credit. So from the seed commons, so that they don't have to carry the burden of the cost of goods, they can always have their shelves full of all the things they need to sell. They're not limited by the amount of cash flow that they have because they can use that line of credit to get inventory. We've helped them, completely renovate the inside of the business so that it looks like success, you know? People like to shop at a place that looks successful, even to the point of doing things cooperatively. Like Rich City Rides is the kind of business that we want in this community. It's not just a bike shop. You go there at any point in day and there's just people, neighborhood people, kids rolling their bikes inside. It's just full of life. It's a node in the community where people cross through. And right now during COVID, they're actually giving away, I think it's 500 meals a day out front, just the kids from the bike club, you know, like through the school district. So this is like not just a bike shop, you know? And so when Rich City Rides, you know, this not just a bike shop place needed a new floor, you know, we did a community build where it was Cooperation Richmond staff, Rich City Rides owners, and then random people from the community who just came in to help them put in a nice new floor, you know, because people value this asset. You know, it's not some, you know, it's not owned by some, you know, some entity out there in the world that doesn't care about you and just wants to take, you know, your resources out of your community and whatever. People see the guys at Rich City Rides and the way that Rich City Rides is in community, and they're like, this is our bike shop. You know, we're going to throw down and scrape tile off the floor and help put down new floors, you know, because this is ours, you know. And that's for me, that and just seeing the development of the 3 co-owners, and now they have 2 new folks who are on cooperative tracks to become co-owners, just to see them develop not just within the bike shop, but also as like just leaders in the community, you know, showing up to community meetings, leading different talks, bringing up issues. I think that some of the other benefits of being in a democratic workplace is that, like Princess said, you have a voice and people listen to it, which isn't common, right? Like usually your workplace is the least democratic place, you know, like people tell you what to do and you do it. But in cooperatives, you know, ideally it's a democratic space where people are actually talking with each other, deciding collectively on pretty much almost everything, you know. Certain things are kind of in their wheelhouse and whatever, but they'll discuss the kind of decision-making points. And that is transformative, not just in that business, but in like the outlook of the people who are experiencing it, you know. They're like, why can't more things in our community be like this, where we have a voice, where we can step up, where we can put forward ideas and plans and work on them together. And so I think that that's the other piece that's really powerful, is you see that leadership developing within those co-owners. And then you also see that troop of boys, you know, young, you know, Black and brown boys, watching them move into these leadership roles and going like, I want to do that I want to be like that when I grow up. You know, I want to like, who owns this business? You know, where's the owner? Is you guys? Oh, wait a minute. How'd that happen? You know? And so it's like, it's inspiring on a whole other level, but not just that they own a business. The way that they own it is also inspiring. I think that the image and the story of Rich City Rides is super powerful, and I can't wait to see what happens with our other projects with Star Wings when they get out there, like little protracted, little like stalled launch because of COVID. You know, we had to really pivot to figure out how to keep them going. And then we also have Space Level 8 that's getting themselves ready to launch. That's a cooperative of entertainers and folks who basically do event coordination with a kind of social justice edge, and just a really powerful offering there. And they're getting ready to get out there. And we're about to also launch a whole nother kind of intensive series like that 6-week, where it's kind of like looking for other folks who are ready. But this one's going to be bilingual, focused on Latinx community, Spanish, English offering to really empower, you know, those ladies on the, you know, selling the tamales and, you know, what do you guys want to do? What do you need? What do you dream? And how can we help you make it happen? We have a whole team kind of developing to focus in supporting that community right now. So it's an exciting time.
Thank you for sharing all of that, Doria. And I'm so glad you brought up kind of like I wanted to actually ask you, Princess, around sort of, you had mentioned like the sense of how it feels to feel good about your work. And I was just curious how it might have influenced other aspects of your life.
Yeah, I'm actually Man, since being with Urban Sales, man, they opened plenty of doors for me, like just plenty of doors for me. So I've been working on multiple different projects around just being able to start my own initiative, things that I feel like, cause I'm the people that we're talking about. I'm actually a low income resident and things like that. So it's like being able to like see my neighborhood and see like, okay, these are the things that we need. And then being able to speak about it and then going to like community meetings, neighborhood council meetings, and being able to say this. But, and honestly, I didn't even know that before up until I didn't know that they even existed. So just being able to know like, okay, I can go here and say like, well, we need our trees cut back at the creek, down the street from my house. Being able to say these things is just, it makes me feel, made me feel good about what I was doing. And so then I was able to start my own initiative. So I'm involved in like, I started an initiative for Wildcat Creek, which is right by my son's elementary school in the neighborhood where I live. And it's not inviting, and things like that. So I started an initiative to bring more benches, trash cans, some art, culture, something on this creek trail so the kids could love it. And then I also see in my neighborhood a lot of low income, like our project housing have been torn down and things like that. So we have a lot of abandoned buildings, a lot of abandoned lots in North Richmond. And so seeing that, like, just seeing that in my neighborhood, like, okay, we need to do something about this. How do we put people in homes? So I'm also a part of an initiative to create tiny homes with revitalizing these vacant lots out here and being able, and then also going through the process of that community ownership. How do we own these homes? How do we create this process where residents, people like me who are low income, who probably won't, be able to ever own a home, how do we create a pathway for them to become homeowners and things like that? And I'm a part of a lot of initiatives in the community, and then just being a part of this initiative, now we are able to create businesses. Now, like the lady I see selling tamales every morning, she can have like at least a food cart or, just a line of credit, or at least do it in a way that is very legal so she won't ever have to deal with something happening to her, not being able to run that business she's been running for years. And so just being a part of Urban Till just put me in all these different spaces. So now I see how it's really easy, like I don't have to, it's not just me, like anybody can come to this community meeting or anybody can come and bring forth ideas. It's just all about plugging them in the right people so that they can get those ideas out there and get it to become reality. I am a community resident that was just a small community resident that's now like in leadership roles, and actually being able to create these things, like create that tiny home eco village and create these benches and trash cans. Like I'm actually in those circles, and it's just a blessing for me, but I'm always spreading the information, always letting people know, like always, like letting everybody, know, and always out there at all the events, just showing face and just, just doing what I do so that I can bring everybody else up with me. Like we all can experience this,
I think that's one of the pieces that people might not know as much about with regards to cooperatives, about how it actually changes the way people show up. And you just illustrate that in so many ways. So Princess, I'm really, really grateful to you for the work that you're doing out there in the community. Some of our listeners might not really know the history of Richmond. Maybe you could point listeners to places they should learn more. I know, there's other historians in Richmond that teach this, but maybe you could share a little bit and just point people to other resources so they could learn about how the resources have been stolen from your community for so many years, and also the history of resilience in Richmond.
I think Richmond is best known because of the refinery that's here. The Chevron refinery is the biggest point source pollution for the state of California of greenhouse gas emissions. It's 100 years old, here before most people came. This really, for many, many years, has been kind of a company town. Chevron has dominated politics, it dominated kind of the landscape. There's a lot of other kind of associated petrochemical companies that kind of cluster around the refinery. And then this is actually the last refinery in a line of refineries that go kind of up the Bay Area coast. It's kind of a refinery corridor here in the East Bay. And so it was also historically the place where a lot of the ships for World War II were made. The whole Rosie the Riveter thing was a big part of Richmond's history. We even have the Rosie the Riveter National Museum and Monument here because of the contribution that the Richmond Harbor made to the World War II effort. And so it was during World War II and afterwards where there was an enormous influx of African American residents who came up from the South. My family's from Louisiana and Arkansas, came up here looking for work during that period and got work in the shipyards or in canning or related industries around the war effort. It was just a huge boom in population, like tripled in the matter of months of the beginning of the war effort, and kind of threw up a lot of temporary housing for all these workers. Kaiser Permanente started here because they needed medical care for all of the workers. And the first child care center started here again because the workers needed child care because, a lot of the men were going to war and women were moving in and working in the shipyards. And so we have the maritime centers, these historic child care centers here. So it's like the first kind of major child care, institutions that related to the war effort. And all this temporary housing became places where low-income people of color landed. And to this day, this temporary housing still exists. Now it's public housing and people still live in these dilapidated spaces, mostly people of color, mostly, now generational poverty after the kind of post-war, post-industrial decline. The 70s were not kind to Richmond in terms of just, recession and loss of jobs. And I think the impact of Vietnam War, especially on young Black men, can't be understated. People came back real different. And then to follow that up with the whole crack epidemic and the rise of kind of gangs. And then my time period is a lot of gang and violence that kind of followed and really plagued our communities. Just so many deaths of young people, men and young women, drive-by shootings and, not even random, purposeful shootings, which continues to this day. It's much better than it was in the 80s, but we still have a relatively high crime rate. People get shot. There's a couple yesterday. Somebody was shot, down the street from my house. And so it's really an interesting kind of a historical, snapshot of what's happened in communities of color in the United States. Like Richmond this is not a story that people have not heard before, this kind of industrial boom and, related to war effort and then decline and kind of war on drugs and crack and whatnot, kind of leaving people decimated. And more recently, the last 20 years is a, huge influx of people from south of the border, coming in and really diversifying the community, really enriching the community with all of the history and the struggles that they bring and, really expanding the conversation or, just for me about the role of economy internationally and, the reasons why people migrate and what, how are we as human beings to respond in these situations and whatnot. So, since the 70s, it's been a majority minority community in the Bay Area, which is unusual. But today, that majority, which used to be majority Black, is majority Latino. And with a kind of really dwindling African American community, folks are really being pushed out because of gentrification and, just all of the struggles that just housing is intense. I think more people born in the Bay Area are on the streets, just homeless, Black people. Living in homeless encampments these days. So it's a really interesting time in Richmond's story. We have all of these demographic shifts and, now the push of gentrification because of all the success in Silicon Valley. We are literally 15 minutes from San Francisco, 10 minutes from Oakland. People can have a house and a yard and whatnot for relatively not expensive for the Bay Area. So it's a real push on the landscape right now. And in the last 10, 15 years, there's been a real resurgence of kind of radical politics in Richmond. So a lot of pushback on the kind of dominance of Chevron within our city council and within city governments and whatnot. And the Richmond Progressive Alliance kind of rose up to just have different ideas and to get themselves into city council roles and whatnot and kind of challenge the status quo, which I actually think got a lot of the more traditional folks who in any other place would be seen as liberal, but here, because of the way all the things works, they're seen as kind of conservative. But they've gotten them to even, shift and open their minds and try new things. So we have a really interesting kind of political makeup where you have people within the city government, people within the county government, people within elected positions who are kind of radical thinkers, like even the more conservative ones, which makes a lot of things possible. Yeah.
And just to piggyback off Doria speaking about the history of Richmond, North Richmond is literally outside of Richmond. And so North Richmond is one of the lowest income communities out here, in this part of town. And it's located, so my history of North Richmond back in the days, this space was the only space that African Americans could buy homes. And so they were forced to live in this community, which is literally located a couple of miles from Chevron's refinery and is located at the shoreline, which most people are saying that is going to be underwater in about 20 years, right? So we're forced in this community where they experienced floods from the creeks that flow down to the bay. They experienced just no actual grocery stores or no actual store like Walmart or Target or anything is nowhere near this community. And so this community was once nothing but African Americans, and they thrived on farming and trading and and things like that. And now it's becoming what was once known as a risk to people is now known as an opportunity. So now people are actually buying up homes now in this community that was once just, geographically, it just nobody would want to be forced to live here. And so it's becoming an opportunity zone as an opportunity. And so, yeah, growing up in North Richmond, there's a rich history about African Americans who were forced to live in this neighborhood, who created their own systems and their own policies and their own ways of making money and wealth and things like that, now have been, forced out because of all things that's going on. So yeah, North Richmond, but it is a community full of life, entertainment, music, food. It's just one of those communities that you can't take away from the spirit that's still there, so.
Thank you for sharing that history. It feels like really important context. And as we come to a close, I wish we had 3 more hours and we don't. And I know there are ways our listeners can support your work, and whether that be, going and learning more, educating themselves. Could you share a little bit just what you would ask listeners to do hearing this wealth of wisdom you've shared? Where do they go from here?
Please visit our website at www.cooperationrichmond.org. On our website, there's details about our projects, our current projects that we have. We also have an intake form on there. So if you are a Richmond resident listening and you want to own your own business one day, please fill out the intake form. We check them and review them. Become a part of Cooperation Richmond. And yeah, just visit the website. Follow us on Facebook too. We're on Facebook too. And just share our stories and become a part of the change.
And I think just spend some time getting to know, about worker-owned cooperatives and the power. Can they be a solution in your community? Do our stories sound familiar? Learn about the seed commons. You can create a local loan fund in your community. How do you make national change? You start locally and you pool your resources and work collectively nationally, And I think if you run across one of our businesses and you want to support, buy from your local co-op. Support local businesses, support local co-ops, support Black-owned businesses, support minority-owned businesses. Put your money where your beliefs are.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. To listen to all of our episodes, go to lifteconomy.com/podcast. That's LIFT economy.com/podcast. You can also sign up for our monthly newsletter at lifteconomy.com/newsletter. Please also rate and review our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.